I'm going to start on selecting and mentioning the beginning of where all of these ideas came from. To begin with, I started by wanting to improve my children's grade point average in school. And I figured that since I was studying at the time psychology, that I could devise a method of mind training to improve the point grade average in school. This is how all this began. After working so many hours with some of the kids, I noticed a phenomenon such as I had questions prepared to ask some of these kids, and they seemed to be getting ahead of me in asking the question. They were answering the questions before being asked. I noticed that phenomenon. It attracted my attention. So then I started the process of making it more difficult for them to want to more or less guess. I was calling it a guessing faculty at the time, to make it more difficult for them to be able to guess what I have in mind to ask. Such as, at first I would give them certain points of reference and let them fill in the rest of the information, which they did. Then I started to eliminate or reduce those points of reference until finally I did not know what the solution would be. Somebody else had it in mind, and the child would also fill in the information, even though I checked it out later. When a person number two, had the answer, I did not have the answer. I only had the question, but the child filled in the answer, even though I didn't have it in my mind. I thought at first that the child was really reading my mind. I was so close to the child that he would be reading my mind, kind of, at some level of mind. But then again, I found that this could be done even at a distance, because researcher number two had the answer, which I did not have, and the child was able to get it anyhow. This is how it all began. I started to specialize, to direct all my interest in wanting to improve such guessing faculty. I called it a guessing faculty. Later, I found that the Dr. Ryan from Duke University was calling it parapsychology extrasensory perception, the field of parapsychology. So I must be delving in the field of parapsychology. I did not know what I was getting into really at the time, but I enjoyed what I was doing, because it was interesting to see these children get excited over answering questions that I had written down and not have even spoken to them about it. And then when I showed them the answer in writing that they came across, they were excited also, of course. That's how it all began. Whenever people would call me and ask me, what do you call that field of science? Well, it didn't have a name at the time. I always would say, it comes under the heading of parapsychology. Well, later on, we started to investigate closer as to what's happening, and this all came about with the study, since I am a specialist in electronics, and the study of the electroencephalograph, the equipment used to measure brain waves, brain activity, since we know that the brain vibrates so many times per second, like the heart beats so many times per minute. So the idea was, at what frequency of the brain is this taking place? And my surprise was to know that people who were able to do this were at 10 cycle brain frequency. And people who were making more mistakes or missing the answers were at 20 cycles brain frequency. By cycle we mean brain vibrations or brain emanations. You see, the brain vibrates so many times per second, like your heart beats so many times per minute. So we can know at what level the child is when the child is answering questions correctly or incorrectly. So I started to gather more information, and I noted that all of this was happening when the brain was functioning at 10 cycles. The brain frequency, the average overall, for mature adults is 20 vibrations per second, or 20 hertz or cycles. The cycle thing has been changed to hertz, and vibrations, emanations of the brain, regardless of what you call them. Vibrations, emanations, hertz, or cycles. We say so many vibrations per second. So we've noticed that the overall average human adults function, do their thinking and acting on 20 vibrations of the brain. But then I noticed that when this phenomenon was appearing, that the brain had to be at 10 cycles brain frequency. So we had to devise a method to slow down the brain waves. In order to do so, we found that we had to close our eyes. Why was this necessary? Because the eyes require, when focusing, 20 vibrations of the brain. It's the only sense, physical, biological sense, that requires the brain to function on 20 vibrations. So then we had to close our eyes to keep from using them, from focusing. The focusing faculty is the one that requires 20 vibrations. So to get away from holding on to 20 vibrations, we preferred, of course, to recommend that the eyes be closed. Then, of course, we know now that in yoga and in Zen and transcendental meditation and in hypnosis, all subjects are required to close their eyes. Now we know because the idea is to slow down the brain frequency, brain waves. Well, everybody was looking for the deepest level of brain activity. We know that by natural means, we have learned to function only on two different dimensions. Stay awake, 20 vibrations, or go to sleep. In going to sleep, there's dream and sleep cycles to be concerned with. A sleep and dream cycle takes about 90 minutes of time to go back to where we came from. We like to say that, because it's the lowest brain frequency that appears in the fetal stage when one is conceived. That frequency appears when we go into deep slumber. So going into deep slumber and back out to almost normal brain frequency, almost to awaken, is called a sleep and dream cycle. That takes approximately about an hour and a half of time. So we say we go back to where we came from and back up again in 1 hour and a half of time. So we do go through several sleep and dream cycles, depending on how long do you sleep at night. So we say the only thing we've learned to do is stay awake or go to sleep. This is by natural means, to be awake or go to sleep. Everybody has learned to do that. But the yogis and the Zen masters and transcendental meditators and a hypnotized subject has been taught to go to the deepest level of mind. And usually this is about 5 cycles brain frequency. Well, I found that the phenomenon was taking place not at 5, but at 10. At 10 vibrations per second instead of 5. So the method that I had to devise of mind training was especially to slow down the brain to be able to get it to 10 cycles before anybody could be at the right dimension that I figured was for guessing what one thinks about. And this is what I was after then. So then the main thing was slow down the brain. Now how are we going to do this? We found that the body excitement or movements, the body will cause one to be at 20 cycles. If you activate your body, you activate your mind, and hold you on 20 cycles, even though your eyes are closed. So next thought was to be able to relax the mind, and so keep it from interfering, mental activity from interfering, and to relax the body, to keep the body movements from interfering, so that we could slow down the brain waves. So we had to devise a method to relax the mind, mental training exercises, we call them, or mental gymnastics, to be able to slow down the body's activity and the mind's activity, to slow down the brain waves or brain vibrations, to get them to 10 cycles, not 5, where all the others go to, because at 5 we are compared to the first anabolic cycle of human development. An anabolic cycle is 7 cycles, and where you're gaining, meaning a child is developing, a human being developing and growing is gaining. And every time you go through a 7-year period that you gain, it's called an anabolic cycle. Now, when you lose, it's called a catabolic cycle. So we say that in the first anabolic cycle, which means the first 7 years of life, here's where we find the 5-cycle vibration. But so we also know now that the mind is functioning here only inductively. The person has no analytical faculties to analyze problems to find out what makes it tick, Well, meaning that everybody who goes to 5, and this is also known in hypnosis as the somnambulistic level, the sleepwalking level, or sleepwalker level, where the eyes are open and you can touch the eyeballs and the person will not blink. That means he's in that particular deep dimension of mind, 5-cycle dimension. It's called the theta level by scientists. Theta is a brain frequency name given to this particular section of the brain, the theta function or theta activity of the brain, which means between 4 and 7 cycles per second or vibrations per second. So then the idea was that we did not want to go into this dimension because we knew that in the first anabolic cycle, mind functions only inductively. This is why a hypnotized subject in that dimension will never ask questions. He only answers questions. So we didn't want that deep dimension like everybody else was going into. We wanted a lighter dimension, meaning between 7 and 14 cycles or between ages 7 and 14, which means during the period of the second anabolic cycle. The second anabolic cycle, we say human beings get a new set of teeth. Human beings, the male voice changes into a mature adult voice. The female goes into her monthly rhythm, and mind starts to function deductively. The analytical faculties of mind to be able to find out why things tick is called the deductive faculty of mind. So this is where we wanted to go. The center of the second anabolic cycle is 10 cycles brain frequency. And to our amazement, we found, in using and studying the electroencephalograph, that the majority of people, and by majority we mean approximately 90%, do their thinking and their acting on 20 vibrations per second. Now here we wanted to go to 10 vibrations per second and maintain consciously aware here, maintain awareness, meaning be able to talk and deduce and answer questions and so on, and ask questions also. So we had to slow down the brain waves to 10 cycles. Once we found that 10-cycle dimension, we need to train the individual, educate the individual to be able to function in that dimension, to be able to function as freely as he does at the outer 20-cycle vibration level. Well, this is where all these methods, we call it methods of mind training, came into being. And all these methods of mind training, we started calling them psyche orientation. Psyche means mind, oriented the mind to learn to function on a different brain frequency and function as freely as we do or have been doing at the other levels, at the 20-cycle vibration. So in this case then, we wanted to get these individuals, human beings, to learn to function on 10 cycles with full awareness and ask questions and answer questions there. Well, here at this dimension, the only thing we can say is that this is the dimension that we used to call the subconscious. You see, before we came on the scene, it used to be said that the other level was the conscious, then we were talking about the subconscious and the unconscious, thinking there were 3 different minds. Well, actually, it's the same mind, same intelligence functioning at any one of those 3 different levels. But the subconscious was below the threshold of consciousness, and we could not function there with awareness. So then what we're actually doing is the 10 cycles lies in the region of the subconscious, meaning in that region that was below the threshold of our awareness. So we're saying then that besides learning to function with awareness at 10 cycles, we're learning to function in the subconscious consciously. Now here we have a contradiction of terms then. If you are in the subconscious, how can you function consciously? It's one or the other. So then we had to change terms. Outer conscious level, meaning 20 vibrations per second. Inner conscious levels, meaning 10 cycle vibration, brain frequency. So here's where we started to separate the centered people. We call them centered because we have found then that about 90% of humanity were learning or have learned to function on 20 vibrations. Here's where they do their thinking, and here's where they do their acting. And only about 10% of humanity, we find by natural means, nobody knows how this happened, learn to slow down their brain waves to 10 cycles and do their thinking on 10 and acting on 20. And this appears to be the correct way of using our minds, to do your thinking, analyzing of problems on 10, and your acting on 20. Now later we find that the 10 cycle dimension is a connection to the right brain hemisphere. And the 20 cycle vibration is a connection to the left brain hemisphere. So then we say that you need to learn to think with your right brain hemisphere and then to act with the left one. Now, in looking into the exceptograph, the electrocephalograph, the EEG for short, EEG for short, we find that functioning at 20 cycles is using the left brain hemisphere. Functioning at 10 cycles is using the right brain hemisphere. Now we know that the left brain hemisphere reigns over the physical world, the visible world of the body. And the right one reigns in the invisible world of the mind. So now, in this case, we need to think where mind reigns and to act where the body reigns. Now, that would be the correct way of doing it, correct way of functioning mentally, the use of brain and mind abilities or faculties. But to find that 90%, approximately 90% of humans use the left brain hemisphere to do their thinking and their acting, I mean, this amazed me. This surprised me. Because in looking into the electrocephalograph again, we find that the brain prefers to function on several frequencies more than any other, and usually it's 5, 10, and 20. In looking into the strength and the synchronicity means the ability to function in a stable manner, meaning to be synchronized means the stable conditions of the frequency or unstable condition out of synchrony or synchronization, we call it. We found that the 20 cycle vibration was the weakest and the most unstable or desynchronized frequency of the human brain. And the 10 cycles was the most synchronized, the most energetic frequency of the human brain. So you can imagine before we can train ourselves to function correctly mind-wise, we're using the 20 vibration, the weakest dimension of the brain, to do our thinking and acting. That dimension is for acting only, it appears to be, because we have found many benefits between those people who do their thinking on 10 and acting on 20, as compared to those that do their thinking and acting on the same 20. So by looking into the 10 percenters, we call them 10 percenters now, and we call them centered people, because the overall brain frequency of the human being is around 20 vibrations per second. Now those who do their thinking on 10, they do their thinking on the center of the brain frequency spectrum. That means that we call these people centered. And the people who are functioning on 20, we call them off-centered. Now these people who are thinking off-center, we call them eccentrics. Eccentrics. So we say that 90% of humanity, we find that by normal, natural means, are eccentrics in their way of thinking. And only 10% of humanity, by some, whatever happened, freakish way of development, or whatever you want to call it, nobody knows really how they got onto thinking on the center, we call them centered. And now we find tremendous differences in the centered people as compared to the eccentrics. And this is why, in looking into these differences, we started to develop a system of mind training, and for stress control, we call it, and mental development. Stress control means learn to relax your body and mind, learn to be able to de-energize the amount of stress accumulated in your body that is hurting your immune system. Now, this is one of the advantages, that when you learn to relax mentally and physically, you learn to do away with your stress factor. The stress is what injures or hurts or weakens your immune system. And your immune system is a system that somebody, we say God, whatever we mean by that, put in the human biological body to heal itself. If that weakens and gets out of control, if the immune system weakens or gets out of control, even if you're a medical doctor, you're going to die as dead as anybody else. So we need to learn how to keep our immune system strong and to be able to prevent the stress from hurting our immune system. This is part of our results when we learn to control our mind, so to speak, when we learn to function on other dimensions, such as the 10-cycle brain frequency dimension. And this is the beginning of our system. How do we slow down the brain waves? First of all, we need to get the students to close their eyes. And of course, they must do it throughout mind training exercises. So when their eyes are closed, then we go through mind training exercises. One mind training exercise is to relax our minds, to be able to learn how to relax our minds consciously. Mind sometimes is very active, overactive. It takes off in any direction, uncontrolled. By this I mean uncontrolled, by uncontrolled means, because one is not used to controlling our minds. Mind wanders, gets away from your conscious controls. So we must learn to discipline our mind to be able to do what we want it to do and to slow down our mind activity. Once we have learned through mind training exercises to slow down mind activity, then we start working on the body. Body movements also cause adrenaline to flow into your body, into your bloodstream, and adrenaline can excite your mind again, bring it into focus again, to become active. So we must slow down our body functions. So there's all other techniques to be able to learn slowly how to relax our body. Now, once we have learned that we must keep our eyes closed in order to accomplish this, and then follow the mind training exercises to be able to relax our minds, and follow special mind training exercises to relax our body, then we have the ideal conditions to start mind training at the 10th cycle dimension.